Hello, as you know, I'm Mark Fielding, psychotherapist and relationship counsellor, and your host. Welcome to season 4, episode 4 of hashtag Psychotherapy Unfogged. Now, as you know, we've talked about addiction this season, and we had our interview with Lucy Self a couple of episodes ago. And also last season, we covered addiction. We've not really looked at young people and addiction. So our guest today has a great deal of experience in that area and also many others. So can I introduce Graham Freeman, certified counsellor, addiction therapist, recovery coach, and drug alcohol intervention specialist. Graham has worked in this field for 23 years. He has worked with the world's leading treatment centres. He is a client relationship and international outreach director for Helena, Cyprus. Its youth village is designed to assist young people from the ages 16 to 26 who are choosing to deal with their addictions, self-harming, stress, depression, anxiety, and trauma. And we'll hear a lot more about his work there later on in the show. So thanks for coming on, Graham.
My pleasure, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming on. This should be a really interesting interview. Graham brings an awful lot of experience, so hopefully we'll have time to kind of touch on all of the areas. But I always kick off, Graham, by asking our guests, well, what personal experiences kind of led you into working in the area of addictions?
Well, to be quite honest with you, well, I've got my own story of recovery. I'm been in June next month. In fact, I'll be 24 years in recovery from alcoholism. So I had my own personal battle there. And prior to that, my mother died of alcoholism. So obviously it's got a personal concept there for me. So like many, I didn't know what I was dealing with. Drinking was always part of my life. It was always part of my coping mechanism. But it brought me to a place where I had to face up to it. And, I drank myself, if you like, over that line from a dependent drinker into an alcoholic drinker. And for me, that was a round the clock, 24-hour drinking when I wasn't sleeping or crashed out. I was drinking. So I realized sort of how strong this was. For me, my recovery journey was through AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, and the 12-step program. And so I didn't go into a treatment centre or go through detox purely because I didn't know anything about it, to be honest with you. And that would have certainly been an easier option for me. But yeah, so that's how I got involved. And then so I was doing voluntarily, work with AA, within Alcoholics Anonymous. Yeah. We worked in, I worked what they call the 12-step program, which was 12-stepping was helping other alcoholics to seek help. So I did voluntarily work. I did work within AA. We worked within prisons. One at the time was Latchmere House in Richmond. And I did quite a bit of work there, working with guys coming out of long-term prison sentences. So that was that. And then 10 years ago, I went to the United States and trained as an interventionist, a family interventionist. So I hadn't heard of that. I was introduced to that field by a friend of mine. So, and that is basically, if anybody has ever heard of interventions, that is working with the family, a lot of the time, family, work colleagues, friends of people who are inflicted with addiction, to try and get them to seek help. So that's a long story on its own.
Yeah, I mean, I'd not heard that term either, kind of family interventionist, but yeah, I mean, I guess it's a big subject, but it's really interesting. So you work with not only the person that is addicted, but also like the family and like the people around them, because I guess addiction does really kind of ripple out, doesn't it? And well, I mean, maybe it could be caused by the family. I mean, I guess there's all sorts of kind of scenarios, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, addiction is a they say it's a family illness. It just doesn't affect the person that's dealing with it. But unfortunately, part of the illness of alcoholism is it's an illness of denial. The person inflicted with it denies they've got it. A lot of the time, that's not all the time, but a lot of the time, the alcoholic addict will deny they have anything wrong with them. This is normal drinking. And I think this is probably one of the main concepts of addiction that makes it quite so dangerous. And it's not only the person that can be inflicted with the addiction, it can also sometimes some members of the family and friends will question whether they've actually, is it as bad as all that, and it's quite astonishing. I've come across people where family members are saying, well, no, it's normal drinking. It's because family members sometimes don't want to believe it's as bad as it is.
Yeah.
So that can be quite a hindrance.
Yeah, and I guess there's also, a real, I mean, certainly in this country, probably, elsewhere as well. I mean, there's a real culture of drinking, and it's not, I mean, it's by no means gender specific, but I'm looking at kind of, when I was brought up, and I don't know, I mean, you might disagree with this, but especially with males, meeting up in the pub and, socializing around drinking. And I know that happens with women as well. It does seem to be the culture, doesn't it? I mean, still, really. I mean, this is kind of what males do, isn't it? They'll meet up. And I guess it's difficult for somebody then because normal drinking for one person is going to look different from normal drinking to another person.
Well, I think, I mean, drinking is very much part of our culture.
Yeah.
And when, I think he's probably improved now. I mean, when I started drinking, I remember my first drink and I remember my last drink. And that's not normal, really. I mean, I remember the effect my first drink had on me. I was probably about 13, 14. And I remember that feeling of confidence overwhelmed me, a warm feeling of confidence, and it was almost like I'd found it. I'd found the answer to life.
Yeah.
And it was a glass of wine on a Christmas, whether it was a Christmas Day or Christmas Eve. But I remember that glass of wine going down, and I remember the feeling. And that's a story I've heard many, many times over the years I've been in this sector. People remember, because a lot of the addicts, alcoholics, suffer from very low self-esteem. They suffer from feeling apart from the world.
Yeah.
They don't feel part of. They don't feel part of the group. They feel somehow odd. And then when they find alcohol, it becomes their best friend. And then when they walk into that party or situation, social situation, it gives them the confidence. It's what they've been looking for. They're funny, they're attractive. They can talk to people, they can talk to women or girls, and vice versa for girls.
Yeah.
And I've heard that story many, many times. So that's not unusual for me. And of course the culture then, you don't see them quite so much now, but do you remember the Alco Pops?
No, I do. I do remember, yeah.
And they were brightly coloured drinks, but they were very strong in alcoholic content.
Yeah.
So, kids were sort of almost like, look at this. What harm can it do?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I do remember, yeah, and I guess that's pulling in people kind of younger and younger. I mean, you mentioned the 12-step program and AA. I mean, I know a little bit about that just through I kind of work in eating disorders a little bit, and I'm quite familiar with Overeaters Anonymous. But can you say for our listeners a bit about the 12-step? Because I mean, this is an approach that works for so many people, isn't it, with addictions? It's a big subject again, but could you say a little bit for our listeners around what it is?
Yeah, 12-step program. Basically, I mean, Alcoholics Anonymous were the founders of the 12-step program. But you'll find now 12-step programs. You mentioned Overeaters. There's 12-step programs for gambling. There's 12-step programs for sex, for drugs, for Cocaine Anonymous, NA and Narcotics Anonymous. I mean, literally, I believe there is hundreds of 12-step programs now for almost Debtors Anonymous, you know, for almost everything that has a problem, which is great, because what it actually, the 12-step program, step one is I'm powerless over alcohol, my life has become unmanageable. So it's getting, we admitted we were powerless over alcohol. You know, it's getting the inflicted person to agree with themselves, if you like, or another, that they have a problem. And then once that, and their life has become unmanageable, a lot of people, there's nothing wrong with my life. You know, a lot of people can be alcoholically drinking, but still functioning, still hold a job down, still have a family. So they look around them, they, well, my life's not unmanageable. Now, it might be that, you know, the consequences yet aren't getting bad enough. So the whole concept is, I mean, it is a spiritual program. Part of it is believed that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. So a lot of that puts a lot of people off because they think it's religious. I mean, I was brought up an atheist, so I'm certainly not religious, but I do believe there is a power out there. I certainly believe that I'm not running the universe. There were times where I thought I was. And it's hard work. But there is a power greater than me. Now, that might be a power of the AA rooms themselves, because in my case, certainly when I joined AA and I started going to meetings and started helping others, my mental and physical obsession with alcohol was lifted. And I don't want to sound like an evangelicist or something, but, you know, it was just lifted. However, I do know it's a progressive illness. So if I took a drink now, glass of champagne or whatever it might be, I haven't got 24 years of catching up to do. My addiction will kick in. So the 12-step program is designed for you to basically start looking at your life, coming to terms with you have a problem. Part of it is making amends to people that you might have harmed, making a list of those people you might have harmed, looking at your part in resentments. Resentments are said to be the #1 offender. You know, we build up anger about things that have been done to us, or imaginary or real, but then we're asked to look at our part in that. And come to terms that we might have had a part of our own destiny, if you like.
And I guess the higher power part, you know, of AA and, you know, NA and all the other kind of organisations, I guess that can mean, you know, different things to different people.
Most certainly. I mean, some people are still atheists. They don't believe that there is, you know, that doesn't bar anybody from AA or any 12-step meeting. It really is a God of your own understanding, or to some it's nature. To a lot of people, in fact, it's nature. You know, nature is, and I sort of sympathise with that concept myself. You know, I think nature has a wonderful way of writing things, of balancing things, and it's been scientifically proven that if you go out in nature, in the wilderness, then it helps calm you and what have you.
I mean, with the kind of nature and the forest therapy, we've had a few guests on the show that, you know, have kind of work in nature therapy, and I mean, absolutely. I mean, there's more and more evidence of being in nature is so good for our mental health, and, you know, and I guess why wouldn't it be? You know, I mean, it's where we're meant to be, isn't it? I mean, I mean, in terms of just staying with the 12 steps for a minute, I guess the group and the fellowship is important. I mean, I get because I guess, I mean, I would imagine it becomes, you know, you make friends, you kind of have a mentor, but it's the fellowship and the group that probably really help with the healing and the support.
Very much so. I mean, for me personally, my higher power, if you like, is not only nature but the connection with fellow AAs. It's that human connection. When you're a practicing alcoholic, as I was, it's a very lonely experience. There's very little sympathy given to an alcoholic because it's not a very attractive illness, you know, being drunk all the time, be you know, lying and everything that comes with being an alcoholic. And yet when you walk into the rooms of AA, there's people there who are not judging you.
Yeah.
There's people there who understand what you're going through, and all of a sudden you're not on your own. So for me, it's that connection. And I think that's what the human spirit needs, is connection. A lot of people try and stop drinking on their own, and some are successful, don't get me wrong, but it's what, you know, it's not just putting the drink down, it's keeping the drink put down. It's not picking up. So if someone annoys you, or if you're in fact elated with something, oh, what possibly could I'll have a drink.
Yeah.
You might have got a year under your belt, and people are saying to you, you know, you don't need to, you're not an alcoholic, you haven't had a drink for a year. Well, once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic, you know, it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
So it's that connection is very, very important.
Yeah.
And I've seen studies that suggest that one of the biggest reasons for male and female of going back to drinking is disconnection. And certainly over the time that I've been around, that when you find out why did someone start drinking, they stop going to meetings, they stop that connection, they stop doing their program, their 12-step program. So they disconnected. So the opposite of disconnection the opposite of connection is going back to unfortunately to drinking. You know, it can happen in as I say, because somebody has a resentment, because someone's angry, because someone is happy, they pick up. So that connection with AA, to be reminded, you know, what it was like and what it's like now. I think that's very important with long-term sobriety.
Yeah, and I guess, you know, initially, I guess that, you know, other people in the group are kind of sharing experiences and saying, "Oh, this happened to me." I mean, that must be really, really helpful. Yeah, and just the connection, you know, I mean, it's so important, isn't it? You know, and then what you say about kind of alcoholism, yeah, I mean, I guess with things like, you know, gambling addiction, you know, for instance, or I don't know, or porn addiction, you know, I guess these things are hidden. But I guess with things like, you know, maybe drug addiction, alcoholism, I guess it's very visible to people on the outside. So I guess, you know, when someone drops really, really heavily into alcohol addiction, it can't be disguised, really.
No, some people are very good at disguising it. I mean, I think I was for some time. You know, I wasn't a fall down drunk.
Yeah.
I was, you know, I'm 6'2", I was 16 stone, I was a big guy. So I could sort of consume a lot without the physical signs.
Yeah.
With me, it was a lot was mentally. It was the loneliness. I mean, I don't quite think there's anything lonelier than that of an alcoholic or addict.
Yeah.
It's that just feeling apart, and that, you know, and that, as I say, that loneliness, that deep seated. I heard it once in the rooms called I had a hole in my soul and I tried to fill it with alcohol.
Yeah.
And that really resonated with me, because I felt as I had a physical hole, and I was trying to get back the glory days of my drinking, if you like, my early 20s, when it was fun.
Yeah.
And I just kept pouring alcohol in to try and fill that hole. And all I was doing, obviously, was just making things worse. So yeah, it sneaks up on you. I think today there's a lot of you mentioned gambling, and you know, that's behavioral addiction.
Yeah.
But for me, it was just alcohol.
Yeah.
But I believe, I mean, these days you get more and more younger people coming into CA, NA, AA rooms because they have cross addiction. I mean, they're on cocaine, on top of alcohol, ketamine, MDMA. You know, there's a whole range of drugs that are now so readily available that certainly weren't available when I was growing up. So alcohol was my drug of choice. But these days, you know, the kids are coming in cross addicted, and that's without gaming, gambling, and all the, gaming is huge with young children. When I say young teenagers, gaming is huge to the point where we're not just talking about a kid that's always on their phone. They will not come out of their rooms. They are addicted to gaming. So I know very little about that, I have to add, but I do know that a lot of the youth training, the youth treatment centres deal with gaming as a number one issue, I believe.
And I guess this is quite a nice segue into your work with the addiction centre, with the Helena Youth Village in Cyprus. I mean, I'm glad we've kind of pulled up addictions in younger people. I mean, it's really interesting what you say, that younger people tend to have cross addictions. I mean, could you tell us a little bit around the Helena Village and just what it offers?
I mean, Helena in Thailand is the parent company, if you like. They have a rehab out in Thailand. This is a very, very new concept to me, in actual fact, because I was introduced to it by a friend of mine who's the manager out in Thailand, and I went out to Cyprus in March to see Helena Village, and it's a fantastic facility for young people. It's half an hour from Larnaca Airport inland. It sort of hasn't even got an address, to be honest with you, because it is quite remote, and so we're very, very much in the early stages. It's for youths from 14 to 26, and it's for them to come there to it's holistic. So it would be 12-step based, but there'll be a lot of things like yoga and meditation going on, and obviously along with the group and one-to-one therapy. So although it's a great concept, it is still very, very much new.
I mean, I really like the holistic approach. I mean, so it's fairly new, but working with young people and giving them, I don't know, introducing probably some of them to things like yoga and meditation. I mean, I guess when they move beyond their addiction, I mean, these things are fantastic for ensuring that they have good mental health, I guess, while they're in recovery, but also afterwards. I mean, meditation and yoga, goodness me, I mean, they could be things that people can lean on for life. I mean, lean on is probably the wrong way to put it, but I mean, No. So basically, it treats, it treats in a really, really kind of wide, holistic way. But with the addiction, it will be 12-step. I guess that will be the kind of foundation of dealing with the addictions. Yeah,
it will be. It'll be 12-step founded as the base, but as I say, holistic approach as well. Working with families will be very important as well. If you've got a young person, you take them out of that environment where they were sick, and you take them for up to 3 months, and then put them back into the same environment. So you're going to get predictable results. So it's often very worthwhile working with the family to understand why their child was like that in the first place. So it's the whole thing of working with the family as well. It's very important. It's understanding why the kid is, the young one has become like that,
And I guess working with the families, I mean, that really brings in a whole new layer of complexity. I mean, because every family is completely different. I mean, obviously, every family is unique, but this might be difficult for you to answer. But I mean, are there generic patterns in families that can lead maybe a young person, like, I don't know, 14, 15, to become addicted?
I believe personally, yes. There's a lot of I think there's still a lot of work to be done on this, but certainly in my experience, as I said to you earlier, my mother died of alcoholism. I believe it's generic. I see when I speak to people in recovery, They will have brothers, sisters, great grandparents, even going back,
Yeah.
So I believe there is a generic, especially in alcoholism anyway. There is a link, certainly. So I strongly believe that myself. I think I believe the scientific community are not all in agreement on that, but certainly for me, who's been around a long time, the people I talk to, it's very rare that there is no link with other members of the family.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, family systems are complex. Yeah, and I guess these kind of things can run in families, can't they? Yeah, I mean, it's a it's a massive subject, isn't it? But I mean, working with the family, I could see how incredibly important that is, because I guess someone comes, and they kind of get over their addiction, and then they're put exactly back into the kind of family system that potentially created it. Then yeah, I can really see how you both have to manage both. I mean, I guess the families in denial quite a lot. I mean, if 14-year-old, for instance, comes in and they're addicted to
Yeah,
something.
I mean, they can be, certainly. I
Yeah.
think when I'm doing a family intervention, for argument's sake, one of the main building bricks to an intervention is meeting with the family and friends. And often, I mean, I had a case a number of years ago now where there was a 15-year-old girl was taking alcohol and ketamine.
Yeah.
And the family obviously were very concerned about this. And so I was referred to them, and I met with this family, and we went through the history. The father was an alcoholic. I remember the father sitting there. He was alcoholic, and the consensus was that the girl really wasn't that bad.
Mm.
And I think and it was saying that an intervention was, it's a bit over the top, and they didn't want to break her trust by intervening on this. She'd told a member of the family that.
Yeah.
And I said, well, hang on, let's go back. We've got a 15-year-old daughter who is drinking vodka before going to school and taking ketamine. Now that's what she's admitting to you. Mm-hmm. So what do you believe is really going on? And anyway, they sort of agreed not to carry on with the intervention. Mm. They thought that, well, it's something she was going through. Mm-hmm. And that's where, for me, there is this denial.
Yeah.
That because the consequences of her actually being as bad as perhaps I was making out, which was pretty bad, mm-hmm. And they just didn't want to face up to it.
Yeah.
So they decided not to go forward with intervening on this girl's addictions. So I wouldn't say that was common, but it's not uncommon to get that approach. I think a lot of the times with families who even recognize that they have a problem, it's recognizing actually how big that problem is. With alcoholism, it's a progressive and fatal disease.
Yeah.
It doesn't get any better. If you are an alcoholic, and that means when you put one drink into your system, you do not know what's going to happen,
Yeah.
A normal drink can go out of a couple of drinks, go home, go to bed. Once an alcoholic puts a drink into their system, they're often running. And they may have been able to control it at one time. They might still be able to control it to a degree. But as the disease progresses, so does your inability to stop when you want to stop.
Yeah.
And I often say to people, if you had a lump on your arm and it was diagnosed as cancer, would you put off the treatment to see what happens? Or would you go, oh my God, where can I get treatment? And how quick can I get it done? That's what most people would do, I believe. But with alcoholism,
Yeah,
they will agree that yes, it's a fatal. I've looked that up on Google. It's fatal and it's progressive. But do you know what? I think we'll just see what happens. We're not going to rush into this.
yeah,
And that is very, very common. It's getting people to understand. I've often heard, alcohol is cunning, baffling, and powerful.
mm,
And indeed it is.
mm,
It's a worthy foe. And it will beat you.
yeah,
You will not beat it. I've been to too many funerals to and I know that you won't beat alcoholism.
mm,
You'll beat it by surrendering.
yeah. Yeah, and I guess the denial aspect, yeah. I mean, I mean, I guess with families, I mean, families can have, all sorts of kind of responses to it, but perhaps some of them would be they feel guilty, they feel responsible. I mean, the family dynamic around addictions, goodness me, that is just so complex, but also so important because the person, is not addicted in isolation. They're part of the family system, and then arguably, a much wider system, the society. I mean, there's so much layering to it. I mean, in terms of some of the people that come to kind of Helena Village, and obviously I know you can't break confidentiality, but do a lot of the young people then come with cross addictions? Like they might be, addicted to one thing, but there might be something else going on. I mean, that's fairly common, is it, with young people?
Well, I mean, there's a sort of there's a rule, if you like, or a concept that addiction in young people or older people will come from trauma.
Okay.
There'll be some form of trauma. Now that might be, abuse. It might be violent abuse, sexual abuse. It might just be a parent that's not available.
Yeah.
In a young child, that can cause trauma.
Yeah.
So, there will be some form of trauma there somewhere. It might be bullied at school. It doesn't necessarily have to come from within the family.
Yeah.
It might be bullying at school. It might be something that's happened outside school.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's very important to involve the family, but then you've got to be quite mindful of what might have gone on with the family. So it is a minefield. It's very, very complex.
Yeah.
And it has to be approached with great skill and understanding by the therapists.
Yeah.
It's certainly not a blanket answer to everything. And of course, now we're more recognizing, ADHD and other areas which just weren't looked at or recognized in the past. So we might have children with complex needs. And so it's sort of recognizing and diagnosing those needs.
Yeah.
So you're right. It's a very complex area.
Yeah, and I guess really has to be client focused. Yeah, I mean, what you were saying about ADHD, yeah, I mean that when I was growing up, it wasn't really. I mean, maybe there was some diagnosis of it, but now, I mean, ADHD is, I don't know, really visible. I mean, lots and lots of people are being diagnosed, and for a lot of people, that diagnosis is massively helpful, but I guess it is really helpful when you're dealing with an addiction to understand if somebody's neurodiverse. I mean, autism is another one, isn't it? There's much more people are, much more able to get diagnosed now. I mean, 30 years ago, I mean, there was some diagnosis, but I mean, the kind of it was completely different, really, wasn't it? I mean, it's better, I think, now, but it does add, even more complexity. I mean, if people want to get hold of, if people are interested in getting in touch with Helena Village or using any of their services, we will obviously put all of your links on our social media sites. But how do they get in touch, Graham?
Well, I mean, in the first instance, get hold of me, Graham. Graham at Helena Village. Graham at HelenaCyprus.com.
Okay. And as I say,
email me and any questions or queries. As I say, it's a very exciting times for us because we are very much in the early stages. In fact, opening this week. So there are very, very few places within Europe where young people can go for holistic help, with addictions. There are one or two, very good treatment centres for you that do a young program, but they normally start at around 16.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you're in the UK, for instance, and you're looking for help, whether you're an adult or a young person, it's very hard. There is very little financial help. If you have money and you're over 18, there's lots of very good treatment centres in the UK and Europe.
Yeah.
But if you're a young person, and then you're pretty much stuck, to be honest with you.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess this is a big subject, and I know we're nearing the end, but yeah, I mean the socioeconomic kind of background to this. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're a young person, you come from a family that hasn't got a lot of money. I mean, it is much more difficult to seek treatment. I guess if you can afford to have private care, lots of places in the UK, isn't it, that offer that. I guess it's much easier. And then I look at NHS services. I mean, I don't know how you see. I mean, this is. Well, let me just ask you this. I mean, how do you see the NHS and addiction services at the moment?
Personally, they're non-existent, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
And even the medical profession on the whole, they very much they don't understand addiction. They don't understand alcoholism. Why don't they just stop? That they've been told if they don't stop, they'll die. Why don't they just stop? Well, the truth, they can't stop.
Yeah, of course.
The medical profession, in my opinion, is very undertrained within addiction, with alcoholism. I've known people to, go into hospital, and I'm talking very recently, and nurses saying to them, you've got to stop drinking. Where it's like, really? Of course,
yeah.
Of course they've got to. Their choice is taken away. So they don't understand. They don't understand drinking. They don't understand alcoholism and addiction. Once that first drink goes in, all bets are off.
Yeah.
And when you see a hopeless alcoholic who might be on a life support machine, and then the first thing they do when they get out of the hospital is drink.
Yeah.
Their choice is taken away. I mean, I've witnessed this personally on many occasions, where the last thing that person needs is a drink, and unfortunately, it winds up with them dying.
Yeah.
I had a guy I was trying to help a while ago, and he was in and out of AA. He was in and out. He was a young guy with a young family, and in the end, he was called to hospital yet again. He was taken by ambulance, and he had a massive seizure in hospital and died. He just couldn't get it. I'd taken him to treatment centres all over the world: Cape Town, Spain, numerous detoxes in this country. But he went to AA for a period, but and I think for me, as my experience gets more and more, sometimes the less I know. Why does one person get it and another doesn't?
Yeah.
AA will often say that we have a spiritual awakening. For me, it's like realization. That, wow, even I might die if I don't stop. It's very complex and very misunderstood, and even now.
Yeah. And I always ask, at the end of the kind of tail end of the show, I guess, their favorite coping strategy for ensuring good mental health. I mean, what would you say?
Well, for me, it's twofold. Well, they overlap a bit. I'm starting a charity called the Wilderness Program. Me and two other colleagues were starting to called the Wilderness Program, and it's worked in the past. We've taken people out into the wilderness, pushed their envelope a bit, just got them walking, and that's proved very successful. So for me, it's the wilderness, getting out in the countryside, and exercise, where they go hand in two. So go to the gym. That helps me with depression or anxiety. So watch this space. The Wilderness Program. It's it's with the Charity Commission now. We're waiting to get our charity number. So I think that is we touched on it before about the wilderness and how it helps people.
Yeah, yeah.
But for mental health, it's that, and what we do is have a coach, therapist, work with the individuals as well. So we sit around the campfire at night, if you like, and talk through problems and hopefully provide answers. But it's taking people out of their environment and putting them into a different environment.
Yeah.
And it can also, can stop with that washing machine head, as we call it.
Yeah.
It can calm them, So for me, that's it. Exercise in the wilderness.
Yeah, I mean, exercise is, probably the number one. I mean, it's so fantastic for mental health, and maybe we'll get you back on at some point. I mean, the Wilderness Project sounds fantastic. I mean, it's an area that I am so interested in. The kind of connection with nature and mental health, and it's a massively growing area, isn't it? The evidence is pouring in, but we need to finish. But I just want to thank you so much, Graham. I mean, we've talked about so much today. It's a really, really interesting show for our listeners, and just thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for inviting me. It's very kind of you.